So now that we got Toyotaro following in the footsteps of Akira Toriyama, where he's basically forgetting things that recently he just wrote, he just written, he just drew, I thought, well, let's go ahead and jump into what Toriyama has forgotten over the years, and it's a huge list, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you everything so far that I can recall that Akira Toriyama has forgotten about Dragon Ball. And if I miss anything, let me know in the comment section below, or tell me in the comment section below what is the most egregious thing that you think is egregious that Akira Toriyama has forgotten about. Akira Toriyama forgot about Broly, and we're talking about Broly from the DBZ movies. So the creator Daiki Miki, the mind behind MMO Dragon Ball Online, he said in a few interviews that Akira Toriyama has forgotten about Broly. He only remembered him before the production of DBS Broly, but before that he had to be reminded about who Broly is, which is really funny to think about when you think back, like in Dragon Ball Super's Tournament of Power. When we heard about the Tournament of Power, everybody and their mother was saying that Broly was going to be one of the Saiyans in DBS. We did not get Broly. It makes sense now why we got Kale. It's weird that we got Kale and Toriyama wasn't like ringing any bells on like who Broly was and his character arc, and he was just like, oh, that's a really cool character and she's got a really cool power, we should probably put her in the manga also, not remembering Broly. So he saw Kale and still needed reminding about Broly. And now I'm making this video not to like bash on Toriyama, I'm just saying these are the things that he's forgotten about, so know and understand that in the future, if Toriyama's attached to it, we will still be getting things that are forgotten about. And honestly, Toyotaro seems to be going that way as well. Goten. Now this one makes more sense because of everything that we've seen so far when it came to Goten and Trunks, but the same guy who reminded him about Broly also reminded him about Goten, asking the creator, Akira Toriyama, if you could draw a sketch of Goten. He's like, who's Goten? So before even the Broly incident, he needed to be reminded about who Goten was. Makes sense though, because Goten really hasn't had anything going on with him for the entirety of his creation. He was literally just created to be kind of like a mini Goku, like to take us back to the early Dragon Ball days. Maybe Toriyama, like, you know, it'd be cool if he had a son that looked just like him, kind of, and then did nothing with him. Trunks is a little bit harder to forget because all the stuff with Future Trunks, and Akira Toriyama is not going to be forgetting all that stuff with Future Trunks because how important Future Trunks is to so many different storylines, and I would imagine that he is probably one of Toriyama's favorite characters. But Goten, he just completely forgot about Goten, and honestly, Goten probably could have stayed forgotten with how they've been using him in the manga, or barely been using him. He could have just probably stayed forgotten, to be honest with you, but I'm hoping that we're getting some really cool stuff from him in the next manga arc, because apparently we're going back to the superhero thing. At least that's what Toyotaro is saying. We're going to go back to the prequel superhero stuff with Goten and Trunks, but still, I think it's really funny that he forgot about like the character that looks exactly like Goku and is his child. It's like, what did he think? It went Goku, Gohan, and then Pan? I wholeheartedly believe that Akira Toriyama forgot about Tails and Dragon Ball, because remember, the Tail gene is supposed to be a gene that is recessive the more the pure-blooded, full-blooded genes get watered down, basically. That makes sense why Goten doesn't have a tail. Also makes sense why Pan doesn't have a tail. But it does not make sense why Trunks didn't have a tail. Trunks should have had a tail in early on Dragon Ball Z. When he was born, actually, he should have came with a tail early on, because he is the firstborn of Vegeta. He was not a kid that was diluted. He was literally the first generation of Saiyans from the Saiyan planet. So this one, it doesn't really have any evidence toward it. I'm just thinking that that's kind of like, oh, we forgot about that recessive gene and like that Saiyans are supposed to have tails, and they just kind of like were like, you know, no one's really gonna care if Trunks didn't have a tail. Like back then, it wasn't like today. If their social media was alive, like, hey, where's the tail? But because there was nothing like that, I mean, he kind of just like, oh, you know, whatever. People will forget and that is what happened with the next character. Now this one has no evidence to back it up, and it could be that, you know, he just didn't want to continue with this character, but I think it's obvious that he forgot about Launch after Dragon Ball, or he didn't have anything like she could do, especially if she was dating, like the last thing we saw was she was dating Tien, and then we don't get to see her all the way until like the Kid Buu arc where she raises her hands to give energy, and I believe that only really happened in the anime, but you know, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Launch is a really interesting character because she's got like almost like a bipolar type of Gemini thing, where if she sneezes, she goes from sweet to like a convict, a criminal, right in like 2 seconds. And that would have been very interesting with dynamic cast that we have in Dragon Ball. I feel like a lot of the Earthlings were very, very dynamic back in the day. Like they had different things that made them unique, just like Tien having a third eye. And I think once we got into the alien realm, Earthlings basically just became like normal Earthlings that we see in other media and obviously our planet. But back in the day, they used to be far more unique. Even so, back in the day, they used to be animals, and that's the other thing that Akira Toriyama has forgotten. Toriyama has completely shelved the animals, the anthropomorphic characters that were in Dragon Ball, the dogs, the dog men, the panda men, the bear men, you know, all those types of characters that used to be in Dragon Ball and early Dragon Ball Z. They're not there anymore. I mean, this is a planet that was very progressive, had a furry president at one point, and then we don't really get to see much of him like after that, or any of these other creatures. Like, was there a secret genocide on planet Earth where they kind of got rid of all these creatures and you know, ended up just becoming, you know, more of a human-based society, or did they slowly die out on their own? I don't know. There's a huge theory here because Akira Toriyama never tells us. He just kind of is like, they're not here anymore, and then they're completely gone. So this is another thing that Toriyama forgot about. Not as important as everything else, but still, it kind of gave a lot of flavor to Planet Earth. Flavor that Planet Earth doesn't have now in Dragon Ball Super. The next one cuts to the heart of one of my favorite forms, and that is Super Saiyan 2. Akira Toriyama forgot Super Saiyan 2. He forgot it while he was working on Dragon Ball Super Battle of Gods, and he forgot about the state. He was interviewed and said that he thought Super Saiyan 3 came right after Super Saiyan, basically. He didn't think that Super Saiyan 2 existed. And this goes to show why a lot of the times when they portray Super Saiyan, it's got sparks and it kind of looks like Super Saiyan 2. Maybe Akira Toriyama thought that Super Saiyan 1 and Super Saiyan 2 are kind of like the same thing, and Super Saiyan 2 is only a more amplified version of Super Saiyan. Maybe like that makes sense, but he said specifically he forgot that there was another transformation. He just figured it went straight into it. So whichever the reasoning, I mean, it's one of my favorite states, mainly because of that Vegeta and Goku fight that we saw in the Buu saga, where they were both Super Saiyan 2s essentially. But at the end of the day, it's not the biggest crime to forget that, in my opinion. Especially when, you know, Super Saiyan 3 hasn't gotten like any love whatsoever, and I would rather have love for that transformation than Super Saiyan 2, in my opinion. So the next one comes to us from Battle of Gods as well, and in Battle of Gods, Akira Toriyama forgot that Android 18's hair wasn't purple. He thought it was purple. He didn't remember that it was blonde. I don't know how you could not remember that she's a blonde and you would just randomly throw purple on her. Maybe he kind of was just in that Bulma vibe or something, you know, making her look more like Trunks. But yeah, he completely forgot that her hair color was blonde. He actually went so far as to draw her with purple hair, and then people had to like point it out to him like, hey, you know, her hair is supposed to be blonde. So then they changed it. Next is something that isn't forgotten because, you know, we haven't seen that it was forgotten, but it came out years ago in an interview and has not been touched since by mainstream Dragon Ball. So I think Akira Toriyama made it up on the spot and forgot about it, and that is S-Cells and Yamashi. Both those things completely forgotten by Akira Toriyama. At this point, it's been years since they've been mentioned, and they've been in none of the stories, and I highly doubt they're going to be in Dragon Ball Daima. So I take this as Akira Toriyama forgot about these two things, which are really, really cool. Yamashi was a really cool origin story for Super Saiyan God, and S-Cells not really that cool, but it kind of gave us an explanation as to why some Saiyans can become Super Saiyan and why some of them can't, and why some can do it earlier. And lastly, this one's the most recent one, and that is that Akira Toriyama forgot that Dragon Ball Super's name is Dragon Ball Super, and that is why in Dragon Ball Super Superhero, he added Dragon Ball Super Superhero, because he forgot that the Dragon Ball name for the new Dragon Ball is Dragon Ball Super. He didn't realize that it was going to be such a long wrong name just like that, but they kept it anyway. So yeah, he just figured that, you know, it was going to be Dragon Ball Superhero, essentially. He didn't realize that it was going to be Dragon Ball Superhero, which, again, Dragon Ball Superhero would have been a much better title, but he forgot that the show was called Dragon Ball Super at this point and not just Dragon Ball, which to me is more of an honest mistake, and I take more hate toward the production team that decided to just run with it instead of questioning it or changing it, you know, to make it more streamlined and sound cooler. But let me know in the comments below if you guys can think of anything else that I have forgotten. I went through many different websites and articles to get you guys as many mistakes as I could find, or many things he's forgotten, and I may have forgotten a few or missed a few or whatever, but let me know in the comments below if you can find something that I did not.
Subscribe for more content.